Welcome back to the Winter Growers Podcast. Today, my guests are Amy Frye and Jacob Slosberg of Boldly Grown Farm in Bow, Washington. In 2015, Amy and Jacob started a one-acre farm at an incubator farm shortly after meeting and working on their university farm. And now in their 9th season, they purchased their own farm property and currently cultivate 30 acres of vegetables, a couple acres of grains, some dry beans, as well as seed crops and flowers. Winter crops have always been the focus from the beginning, and their main winter crops include kale, collards, radicchio, cabbage, beets, storage radish, celeriac, onions, and winter squash. 80% of their sales are through wholesale channels, including distributors and food hubs. Plus, they operate a 275-member winter CSA and recently opened an on-site farmstand. Amy and Jacob's story is a great example of rapid growth of their farming goals combined with more mechanized and scaled up winter production while simultaneously raising a family and anchoring their farm business and home on permanent land. This episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Seed Time. Have you ever struggled with the timing of winter crops and planning your succession plantings? I've been playing around with a new crop planner called Seed Time that makes it so incredibly easy for home gardeners and market farmers alike to visualize when to seed, transplant, harvest, and more all year round. If you'd like to save a ton of time and avoid headaches planning and growing your crops, get your free Seed Time account with a $5 free seed coupon at seedtime.us/no-till podcast. That's seedtime.us/no-till podcast. This episode is also brought to you by Vermont Compost Company. Since 1993, Vermont Compost Company has grown from a small local operation to a company supplying premium living soils to thousands of successful growers all over the country. Combining meticulously crafted compost with intentional sourcing of the highest quality materials and amendments, Vermont Compost Company consistently delivers organic growers the soils their businesses depend on. In addition to product consistency, growers can count on Vermont Compost to provide the technical expertise it takes to make your organic farm flourish. Visit vermontcompost.com to learn more. Why grow alone? All right, enjoy the show. Hello, Jacob and Amy. Welcome to the Winter Growers Podcast.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's great having you here. So at the end of season 3, I polled listeners for recommendations for season 4, and your names and farm came up quite a bit. So it's exciting to see who listeners want to hear from. And you are located out in Pacific Northwest. So it's great having, more farms coming from different areas of the country. And also from some of the notes that you sent me, what I found really fascinating is, you started in 2015, but also with the intention of winter growing and also with the intention for more wholesale. So it's great to see kind of that approach with winter growing, and I'm excited to dive in on some of those details. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to chat.
One of the ways I like to get started is to learn a little bit more about your background, where you grew up, if you had farming influences growing up, how you met, all that good stuff.
I can start. So I'm from Minnesota originally, and I grew up running around on my grandparents' farm. They lived next door, and so they had beef cattle. And I definitely wasn't like a farm kid per se in terms of having to do farm chores, but grew up helping in the garden, canning, cooking, baking with my grandma. And so kind of had that experience and also really just enjoyed the outdoors. And then went to school for environmental studies and was kind of on a more general environmental studies, ecology track. And then kind of got realized if I cared about the environment, I had to care about food and how it was grown, and kind of made that connection, and then came into more food systems. And yeah, I'll let Jacob kind of start with his background, and then we'll talk about how we met and whatnot.
Yeah, I grew up in the city in Seattle. My summers were always spent outdoors. And actually, growing up in the city, I spent a lot of outdoor time as well. And so I kind of started to realize that, like Amy, if I wanted to care about the environment, I had to care about agriculture. That was kind of the driving force. I think I took a trip to Costa Rica in high school and visited some agroecology farms and understood those principles as something that kind of just was really spoke to me. I guess the whole systems-based approach of agriculture. I also grew up working in bike shops, like bicycles, and doing maintenance and mechanics on human-powered devices, and did a lot of kayaking. And I rode every day, all the way through middle school and high school. And so being out on the water, riding my bike through Seattle's a beautiful green city, just like kind of immersing myself in the environment. I also knew I wanted to live and work outside. And so I was definitely split passion between outdoor education and then agriculture, and found my way to University of British Columbia. It has a great agroecology program, and a specific focus on not just agricultural science, but agricultural science and how it relates to the human side, both political and nutrition and sociological study of food systems. So it's actually not an agricultural science school; it's a school of land and food systems, and that is where Amy and I met.
Yeah, so we both worked at the University of British Columbia farm. I was doing my master's in resource management. So I feel like Jacob kind of has a more, I would say, like hard science background in farming. He's done the soil science, the weed biology, all that sort of stuff. And I came from a bit more of a food systems policy, land use planning perspective. But yeah, we met working at the farm and got married at the farm and knew we wanted to start our own farm, and in some ways would have loved to stay in Canada, but land prices there are so ridiculous. It's not that it was definitely not easy to buy a farm here, but yeah, we've learned about Skagit Valley, kind of driving through back to Seattle to visit Jacob's family. And we would always stop at the co-op here, and it's a great co-op. So we would be like, well, Skagit must be a great place to be if there's this awesome food co-op with all these local farms supplying it. And then we learned about Viva Farms, which is a farm incubator here in Skagit, where we got our start. And yeah, we made the move in like January 2015. Jacob had got a job at a local seed company, which was kind of the catalyst for making the move. And we started Boldly Grown that first year on 1 acre at Viva.
That's great. So I'm going to back up. I love hearing about, influences growing up. So, outdoors, growing up near your grandparents' farm. So the outdoors part is so great. Jacob, I'm curious, when you mentioned kayaking, was that whitewater kayaking?
Both. Yeah. Whitewater and sea kayaking for sure. But whitewater was, I was lucky enough to do some kind of outdoor adventure experiences in Colorado and Utah, like Green River, Colorado River, San Juan River. My aunt and uncle live in Colorado, so I kind of had a second home there. So I did work in bike shops in Colorado as well. And I did actually the last summer that I spent not farming, I led outdoor ed programs in Jackson Hole area. And that was a hard decision. I did a NOLS course, the National Outdoor Leadership course in Patagonia the semester before. That was 2000. I'm totally going to get the year wrong. I can't remember, but it was in my sophomore year of college, and I wanted to use those skills, and I was deciding between outdoor ed and then farming. And that ended up being the last year that I did outdoor ed. And then I guess I've been farming ever since. So I think that was 2009 is what I think it was.
Yeah, we're both NOLS grads. I ended up doing a NOLS course actually the week after we got married. So we joked that it was my solo honeymoon. So I went backpacking and whitewater canoing in the Yukon. And so, yeah, we both really, I feel like we could have had this alternate life as NOLS instructors or outdoor educators. But I also feel like the NOLS curriculum and like leadership framework really informs our interests and approach. And
I there's not a day that goes by, a week that goes by where I don't kind of call on those skills or reflect on that experience as such a formative experience. And I really think that informs how we run our business and how we strive to manage our employees and interact with our community, my greater community. There is actually a Knowles base. The Pacific Northwest Knowles base is like 5-10 miles away from here. And we'd like to spend more time in that community. And maybe we will continue to do that. But yeah, it's a really special place in the Northwest here that we found too. So
yeah, I think one of the Knowles leadership skills is tolerance for adversity and uncertainty. And I feel like that's just been my mantra since starting the farm. So yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love the combination. I think that's great. I spent a brief stint in Seattle many years ago, and that's actually where I learned how to whitewater kayak. So, what if I remember Snoqualmie, Snohomish, those rivers? Yeah, so that's what I was kayaking, and they're serious.
We actually,
so no joke.
We've been wanting to circle back and spend more time outdoors and doing outdoor recreation as we. The farm, I guess, like settles down maybe a little bit. Is kind of our crazy growth curve is kind of settling. We'll probably talk more about, but we just bought a tandem kayak from a friend used, and I've been looking at it being like, okay, it's time to get out to the San Juans. I'm excited.
Yeah, maybe this summer. Yeah, between the farm and the growth trajectory, having kids, the pandemic, all that. I feel like kind of gone by the wayside, but we aspire to get back to that.
Well, good. And then Amy, your grandparents had a farm. What kind of farm was that?
Yeah, so they had maybe 100 acres or so in rural southeast Minnesota. We lived right next to it, so I could walk or ride my bike through the backfield over to their place. And it was beef cattle, primarily, I guess, grass fed, but I never heard them use that term. Like that was just how they did it back then. And and I wish I had talked to them and interviewed them more. We did a bit before they both passed away. What was my grandpa's quote about? Something about manure. I really like manure.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of manure. I was lucky enough to meet both Amy's grandparents, I think at least 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, they were pretty amazing people.
Yeah.
My grandpa won a number of soil conservation awards. I feel like he was a bit ahead of his time in terms of using like terraces and just like soil management techniques to prevent erosion. So definitely not vegetables, but like I said, the garden was where I spent most of my time. So,
I mean, I remember quite a few conversations with Bill in particular. And I remember, he didn't inherit the farm. It was something that they had to buy. And they bought the piece of land that they could afford, and the piece of land they could afford was hilly. And there was not a lot of trees, and so erosion was a problem. And so he got good at building terraces on the farm. And so it's a really beautiful piece of land that was probably overlooked by a lot of people because it wasn't straight and flat. And he put in terraces to fight erosion. And for that day and age, it was kind of the standard type of farm. But now it would be hyper diversified because they grew pig, they had cattle and they did hay. They also grew grains and corn and, had a rotation that was, a well-managed farm. And it's totally different than what the area looks like now. And
corn and soybeans
for miles around.
Mm.
For miles around. So it was definitely bittersweet when, I think we actually had the opportunity to, do we want to resettle in Minnesota and start farming there? And there's definitely a piece of tradition that we missed out on by not taking that route. I didn't get to spend as much time with Amy's grandparents as I would have liked. It's kind of like the closest family farming relation that I kind of inherited through Amy.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I love those stories, and I love how much they do influence us, in the present day. So
my dad always wanted to be a farmer and wasn't, but we kind of had various hobby farm activities growing up, and he his degree was in agricultural economics and journalism, so he worked for the local ag newspaper. So kind of lots of influences, and then went away kind of more towards general environmental studies and came back. So
And so you both met at the University of British Columbia, and they have a pretty robust university farm, correct? So
Yeah.
that must have been pretty influential as well when you got started there.
Yeah, it was the UBC farm is an amazing place. A lot of our community is there. Like, that's why we got married there at the farm. Yeah, it was a pretty transformative place. I was there for almost 9 years working there, starting as the marketing coordinator. I found it literally, I was out on a run one day on campus and was like, oh, there's a farm here. And then went and volunteered once, and then they had a job opening. And so I started as the marketing coordinator, doing the farmers markets, and started like the on-site market that they have. Started their CSA program and did all the restaurant sales. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then over the years kind of transitioned into more project management, administration, etc. Ended up as the director of the unit for the last 3 years, which was a great experience as far as learning about HR, admin, and budgeting, but also definitely burned me out on high-level university bureaucracy. So I was ready to be done with that at that point. And Jacob had started, he could tell about what he was doing there.
Yeah, I started as a student worker, started volunteering and having some kind of class engagement at the farm, and then became a student worker and kind of worked my way up through the field production side of things, doing a couple of research trials and then working more on kind of the production side, and then helping grad and professors do their own research at the farm. And my focus was the annual production, the vegetable production, hoop house and field, and also poultry production. So we had, I can't remember, a couple hundred laying hens, and there was some feed research projects and soil research and cover crops and disease. And so it was a varied exposure to a lot of different things at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's great. I wish more schools had, better farm programs like that, because it really makes a difference, I think.
It's worth noting that the farm, it was a dynamic time that for the farm while we were there. It was started about 10 years before I started getting involved. So Amy was probably involved for like 4 or 5 years before that. And it was really restarted. The Department of Agricultural Sciences was one of the founding departments back in the teens, basically. And being in the city of Vancouver, that's not really like farmland. And they moved much of the agricultural research out into the valley, about an hour and a half away from university. And so undergrad students really didn't have much experience or exposure to the research and actual like where the production is. And a group of students said, well, we want a farm here on campus. And they kind of reclaimed a piece of land that was not really well used. And the focus of the farm became learning, not so much teaching, but also engaging with the community. And now it seems like it's obviously been 10 years since we've been there, but it's really a core function or a core kind of service provider for a great diversity of people, from university students to researchers to the community. And, globally, it's an example as an educational institution. So we were really lucky to be involved with kind of like the teenage years, I want to say, of that organization. And it's definitely highly regarded now. And it was a struggle and a challenge to kind of establish that type of research and that type of community engagement as like a pillar of that department and the university. So we're really proud of our work there. Yeah.
So then you landed at Viva Farms, which is incubator farm. And how did you hear about that? And what was your relationship there?
I think it was Google.
Yeah, I don't remember how we first heard about Viva, but we, I think it was like fall 2014. We were, kind of at this point where, like I said, I was burned out on high level university bureaucracy. We were basically like, do we stay in Vancouver? Jacob keeps working at the farm because he can't live in the city if he's not working on a farm. And I was going to go work at a pie shop and make pies because baking is my other thing I love to do. Or we were going to move out of the city. So Jacob found this seed job, and we somehow heard about Viva. We came down and met with.
Well, I remember actually first we went to the Tilth Producers of Washington conference in November, and we met Ray DeVries, who's the owner of Ralph's Greenhouse, which is several 100-acre organic vegetable farm. They were the last farm to be certified organic the first year back in the 80s. So it was like Ray says, we were the last farm that the inspector came to visit. And so they're organic number 86 or something for Washington State. And he was like, whoa, wow, you guys have a lot of cool things going on. You should come by for a farm tour. And so we did on our way back to Vancouver the next day. And we were kind of like, just really, our imagination was captured by Skagit Valley and everything that is going on here and everything that could be going on here. And that kind of got us rooted, our first like kind of good connection in Skagit beyond the co-op.
Yeah. And then somehow we found out about Viva and met with them and talked about what it would look like to rent an acre. We also at the same time learned about the Puget Sound Food Hub, which is our local food hub that had then started. It had been running up for a while at that point, but was still pretty small. But just having that marketing opportunity, I was like, wait, you're telling me you will deliver my stuff to Seattle and I don't have to go drive in Seattle and I can just stay in Skagit. So that seemed awesome. And yeah, it just seemed like a great opportunity. So still close enough to our Vancouver community, which we were really sad to leave, but close to Jacob's family. It ended up that my brother happened to move out from Minnesota that same year to Seattle. So then my parents moved out. So
once the grandkids,
once the kids and the grandkids were all in Washington, it was everyone needed to come. So.
And then at what point did you decide, when you're sort of envisioning your farm or future farm, that you really wanted to focus on winter production? How did that really land for you?
It was from the beginning, really, partly because that was an opportunity that I saw at UBC. I was managing the annuals and a lot of the kind of assisting in the sales of a lot of the vegetables at UBC Farm. And, I saw that if we had carrots when everybody else didn't have carrots, or we had winter squash when everybody else ran out, we were going to sell it at a good price. And also having a full-time job in the seed industry, I was really busy in the spring and the summer, and in the fall, not so much. And I saw that we could plant a larger volume of carrots. You could plant carrots once, you could weed them once, and you could harvest them once, and you could sell them for 6 months. And so that was kind of a labor. Yeah, it was appealing, and it was also a labor management tactic too. So
yeah, knowing that Jacob had a full-time job and I was going to be our main farmer that first year, it was kind of like, how do we not do crazy succession planting and farmers markets and try to do, like, we didn't want to kill ourselves. I think we were kind of looking for, just something different. And there seemed to be a good opportunity, especially with our climate here in Western Washington, to be able to do that. While we were at the university farm, we also had done a lot of work to sell into the dining halls on the university. And so again, we saw the opportunity of wanting to do more farm to school institution sales. And that season obviously is not in the summer generally. So there's a number of factors that pushed us towards that. And I think the focus on wholesale, again, was just kind of the simplicity of it, sending out large volumes. We're not morning people despite being farmers. So we were like, we are not doing farmers markets.
Well, that's smart. So you grew fairly quickly from 1 acre to, 25 acres, I read, in 7 years at Viva Farms. And then you landed on your home farm. So how, what did that process look like? I mean, to be able to transition everything from, the incubator location to your new farm, that must have been quite a year.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride the whole time, for sure. I don't know that I would recommend that growth trajectory to anyone. But I don't know. Why did we do it? I think because the demand was there. We've been growing based on demand. I guess I would say is like, we haven't hit a cap for demand. And I think for us, I guess I've been reflecting on this as like, why are we growing? Like, what is the end game for this? And I think it's kind of like, if there's still demand, we feel like what we're doing as far as being a regional provider of locally grown, organic, sustainable food, like to us, that translates to impact. Like we're trying to move the needle as far as people buying local and organic. And that was another, I think, part of why we were interested in wholesale and like getting into grocery stores, was just knowing that that is where the majority of organic purchases happen. And it seems like there's more of an opportunity to reach new people and like grow the pie for everyone. So
food access is also important to us. And I think there's some stat that's probably outdated now, but we remember it was something like 97% of all organic produce purchases are made in a grocery store. So it's like, let's bring our produce that we believe has, the power to make change to the place where those purchases are already happening. If we can offset maybe Yuma, Arizona grown lettuce with a radicchio grown in Skagit in December, that feels like it's doing something. And also, I mean, we take lower prices for our produce than we would at the farmer's market. And at the end of the day, that means our produce is it's more affordable. We're not growing as many specialty items that maybe would be commanding the highest dollar. There are definitely items that we do, make more money on, or they're more specialty and have that niche. But, we grow a lot of green kale and it doesn't sell for a lot, but we grow a lot of it and it goes out. So.
Yeah. So I think that, I guess, is kind of a tangent a bit about like why we wanted to grow. And yeah, as long as there's been the demand, it's just kind of like, yeah, like this is making an impact. Let's meet people where they're at and fill these needs. But as far as the process itself, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like, to be fair, like I would say the growth has probably been driven by me, like the size and the speed of it. And I think that's partly like my systems brain saying like, well, if we bought this tool, we could do this much more with the same amount of time. Whereas if you're doing it by hand, or if you're using this tool that's, maybe cheaper or smaller, then, you're going to be working on a smaller scale. And it was really the first like 2 or 3 years we're like proving it to ourselves that we can grow the stuff. And I think the growing is not necessarily the hard part. It's all the logistics and all the components that feed into like your success as a business operator.
But I want to say, just to be clear, when you say growing it is not the hard part, we still have crop failures.
No, clearly. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But that's not the limiting factor. That's not the limiting factor, I would say, and so when we were looking at equipment purchases or that kind of thing, we were always like, okay, well, if we got this tool, it would save us this much time, and then we can grow. Like, how many acres can we grow with that tool without kind of moving to the next scale? And like a great example is our Colt Crest finger weeder we bought in, I want to say it was 2017. So that was our 3rd year in production. We were growing like 4 or 5 acres of vegetables. And it's still our primary cultivating tool. Like we have a few others, but every acre that we cover basically gets hit by that, probably like in between 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 times. And we're growing 30 acres of vegetables now. And so like, that's a scalable tool that it paid for itself on the first, probably 4 or 5 acres. And it just keeps going. And we, there's maintenance, but it really allows us to kind of keep going.
Yeah, I think we were it felt like we were over mechanized at the beginning for the scale we were at, but because we knew we had kind of aspirations for growth. And I feel like, kind of back to your question about like, how was that growth trajectory? How was the transition? I mean, I think it forced us to be very financially adept. Like, it's very capital intensive to do like what we did, like especially to do storage crops. There's storage infrastructure. It just becomes like product movement at some point. Like you're moving a lot of volumes of heavy things. And so to have all the tools you need to do that, and the cooler space and the dry storage, all that. So it just made us have to dive into that world of like understanding lending and capital investments. And that was definitely a challenging learning curve. Jacob's dad had run his own business and is very adept at that. And I definitely had, times of tears looking at spreadsheets with him as like trying to figure this out. So we're very fortunate to have family with various expertise and support as well. But learning curves on all fronts. But I do feel like that financial knowledge and information has really been super important for our ability to grow and then to buy a farm. And it's something that it's like made me passionate about wanting to help other farmers like be more financially adept and figure out how to read their balance sheet and what all that means. And so cash flow.
I'd say our most challenging year was 2021, because that was the year that we went from 12 acres to 25 acres. And that's a big jump in 1 year. And it probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. But we made it through and we hit our financial goals. And the real driver for that was we knew that we wanted to buy a farm, and we knew that the finances for the way that they lend, for the way that banks lend on land and farms is based on past performance, not based on projections. And so we also had a lot of wholesale customers that wanted our product, and they wanted to kind of keep scaling that up. And so it was kind of a leap of faith. We didn't really buy that much more equipment from 12 to 25 acres. It was like, I think we got a second tractor that year instead of buying like lots more implements. It's like we just need to be doing the same operations, but simultaneously. That was really what we did. And it worked. It was also really challenging because we were spread out a lot, but without that kind of the demonstration of growth and like the demonstration of the scale that we were projecting, the banks wouldn't have kind of set us up wouldn't have allowed us to go forward with the farm purchase. So,
and that was definitely part of the beauty of finding an incubator farm where we could continue to scale and add land over the years as we kind of bought our own equipment and, had an offsite pack shed and things like that. So I definitely feel like that kind of fast tracked our ability to grow our business to the scale where we had the financials to show the bank, hey, we can do this. We have the performance history to show it.
Today's episode of the Winter Growers Podcast is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. All right, back to the show.
So now you're on your home property. Can you give listeners a description of what the land looks like, infrastructure, just kind of the lay of the farm?
Well, yeah, let's do that. But let's start with what it looked like when we bought it.
Okay, sure.
So we bought this property summer 2021. So last year, 2022 was our first season growing on it. I think we had originally looked at it maybe 3 years prior it had been on the market. And we were like, no way, way too big of a project. It's an old dairy farm. So it's a 58-acre property. There's 8 acres of riparian buffer along the Samish River. The rest was pasture, but there was probably 50,000 square feet of old decrepit dairy barns and an old house. And we were just like, we don't know what to do with this. This is like insane. And so we were like, nope.
Along with the 50,000 square feet of barns, there was 50,000 square feet of like really terrible quality concrete that was poured, 50 different pours over 40 different years. And so there was a lot in the ground. And then also, in addition to that, there's probably, I don't know, 5,000 tires, 10,000 tires, maybe. That was used for old silage bunker plastic covering and used as bedding kind of cushions for the cows. So it was a big cleanup project that started from basically the day that we took ownership.
So we looked at it a few years back. We're like, no way. And then had a number of other things fall through in the ensuing couple of years. So then it came back on the market and we were like, well, maybe this is our project. And once we found out we could certify it organic immediately because nothing had been sprayed, and it had water rights, and it's good soil. Those are some pretty key factors that we were like, okay, we'll figure out how to deal with the rest of it. But yeah, it was definitely a huge year plus long project from when we closed so basically we had all the dairy barns deconstructed by hand and the material salvaged for reuse, which was great to be able to do that.
And it also saved us money from keeping it out of the landfill.
We had all the foundations of the concrete foundations crushed and placed on site.
We worked with an architect to go through the kind of site plan for our long-term kind of like farm yard, looking at where to put utilities and where we hope to eventually build new pack shed building and new equipment storage, where to put the greenhouses, how to have flow for fire trucks, and how to have a county approved parking lot for our new farm stand, water, what's the stormwater management plan, all the things that the county requires to have a viable business operating.
So yeah, it was definitely a learning curve. But yeah, that's what we spent a lot of the first 6 months to a year doing, in addition to renovating the house and moving our family here. So we're all very excited, us and our crew, to like going into this coming season to not be moving farms and to just be feeling like we're over the roller coaster and the hump of that, and now we get to refocus on farming. So yeah, we definitely are super grateful for our crew, and they really carried the load during those couple of years where Jacob and I were really focused on first the farm search and purchase, and then the infrastructure projects and the move. So it feels like things are settling out a little bit. But yeah, the property itself is beautiful. We're in West Skagit Valley, and
we're about 5 acre, or for about 5 miles from the ocean, and we're right off of a road called Chucknut Drive, which is a scenic drive that goes from Burlington up to Bellingham along the Chucknut Mountains, and there's a great community of small farmers, and there's also several large farmers that grow mostly potatoes and grain and broccoli and Brussels sprouts. There's also a lot of seed crops grown in our valley: spinach seed, beet seed, chard seed, cabbage seed are all grown in our area, and it's a diverse growing area for sure.
The property does flood, which is another one of the reasons that previously we didn't really want to look at it, because flooding and winter farming kind of a challenge. So that is definitely something that is a concern, and also probably one of the reasons we could afford the property. And in November 21, there was record flooding. So this was after we purchased it, before we were growing here. So it was a good chance to see what happens during a record flood. And so, yeah, it definitely has us thinking about, do we try to, in the future, possibly rent a nearby parcel that is maybe higher just to have some flexibility. But, I think we're just having to realize that occasional flooding might be in our future. And I think how we're managing that is trying to have more diverse crops, as far as we are starting to do. I would say we've basically transitioned to kind of year-round production. We do a lot more summer stuff now as well, but winter is still our main season. But also just trying to invest in equipment now that allows us to harvest more quickly and more efficiently, so that we can get things out of the fields earlier if needed. So kind of TBD how all that will play out. But
bigger coolers, more storage rather than winter. I think in the past, the Skagit Valley has a system of dikes and drainage ditches that we are about a half a mile before they start, and so we are in western Skagit for sure, down in the good soil, but we're before the dike system starts, which actually is kind of interesting because when that record flooding happened, there was a lot of fields that were part of the ditch system and dike system, and then when they flooded, they were wet from November until March, and because of the way that the topography is around our farm, the water was gone in 2 days. So from a kind of a management, like spring growing, fall growing, the drainage here is good. The water access is good. It just, we got to watch out for those big events.
So then what are your primary winter crops? What do you focus on? And I guess now that you're transitioning to more year-end growing, how's that going to affect your winter production?
Yeah, I would say main crops have been greens. So we do lots of kale and collards, multiple plantings of those. And so those really, I would say, start in June is when we start harvesting. So those are like a full season crop for us. And our crew's out today harvesting the rob and some bulk leaves. So they really are a full season crop. Radicchio is one of our big crops. There's definitely been a push in the Pacific Northwest for radicchio promotion and growing again as like a local alternative that can be grown and sold in the winter rather than bringing in lettuce from California. So greens, radicchio, winter squash, carrots, beets, cabbage. We do a lot of daikon radish and watermelon radish. What else? Celeriac.
Peppers and onions are definitely big crops for us. And the peppers, they started as like a little side project for us because we wanted to have dried products to offer our CSA members, kind of having some diversity in our winter CSA.
Yeah. So just a side note, we do have a winter CSA, even though we've always been wholesale focused. Our winter CSA, I call us the accidental CSA farm because that wasn't really the plan, but
all my family friends our first year were like, how do we buy your produce? And we're like, we don't know. So
we started the CSA that first season kind of as an afterthought. We're like, let's try a winter CSA. And it's grown since then. So this year, 275 members. We have like 15 drop sites between Seattle, Skagit, and Bellingham. So the peppers were like, how can we do some interesting stuff, have some more value-added items in the winter? But since then, peppers is one of the summer crops that we've started growing more. We're growing about 2 acres of peppers this year, and then bunched carrots is our other main summer crop, and then the greens. So I think they're a nice complement to the winter production, and it does, I feel like our cash flow is a bit opposite from other farms, like because our winter cash flow is higher. So it is a nice way for us to even out our cash flow and even out our labor needs. So it's not like so intense in the winter and then not as intense in the summer. So I think they complement each other well. And again, I think help us manage our risk of flooding. And so I think once we had gotten customers interested in our products and they knew that we had good reliability and quality, then they're interested in kind of where else can we fill gaps. So
we're really trying to find crops that make sense for us to grow and that we can market at I guess I want to say like fair prices that are, they're not like, we're not looking for top dollar on any one particular item, but it's like a steady, staple, easy sale. And for us, the way that we grow peppers is not like I wouldn't call it like it's high value for us, but it's a low input. It's all field grown on plastic. There's no trellising, there's no pruning, and nothing like that. So looking for economical ways to grow crops so we can sell wholesale is really our focus.
So you have 2 new high tunnels.
I was just going to say, that being said, we're adding.
Yes.
I feel like we're like this year, it feels like we're on this opposite trajectory of many farms because we started with the wholesale focus. And now, given the location of our farm, we opened a farmstand. And so now we're growing this 1/4 acre market garden, we're calling it, with like all this diversity of stuff to sell through the farm stand. And we added 2 hoop houses. So we're growing a bunch of tomatoes and other stuff, again, like for the farm stand. So it feels like maybe this will be a bad idea and we'll all be kicking ourselves, but we're also
eating
very
lots of
excited.
tomatoes.
Yeah, excited to eat lots of tomatoes.
And how's that going to influence your labor needs? And, how many employees do you currently have year round or for the winter? What does that look like?
Yeah, we have about 10 right now. And I would say we had 14 or so at our peak. In kind of November, December is our busiest time.
September to December. Yeah.
And we're again trying to figure that out. It's hard to forecast given that we haven't really done this before, but I would say we're trying to staff up so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and not have the labor we need. So
we tend to attract quite a few people that are interested in ag but don't have a lot of experience, and so I think just throwing them into a situation where they're picking hundreds of cases of kale and carrots on a daily basis or weekly basis, like that's not the most like enriching experience. Whereas on a smaller farm that's diversified, you'd be getting more different crops. And so I think that these people, these employees will learn about horticulture and plant growth, and
it'll give a little more diversity of tasks. And we're excited for it.
Yeah, so it'll be good.
And you, Jacob, you work for a seed company as well? Is that?
Yeah, I do still work with it's called Gowan Seed Company. I originally, it was called Osborne Seed Company, and I was their main commercial rep from 2015 through 2017 or so, 2018, I guess. And in that time period, Gowan purchased Osborne. Chris Osborne, the owner, was turning 70, I think, and was ready to kind of pass the reins on. And Gowan was the company from California that purchased. And for me, it's been a great transition. Like it's a larger company, and there's a lot of really passionate people that work there. And I get to work with really fantastic growers. But right now I primarily work with, pretty large scale commercial growers. And I love working with them and seeing their scale and helping them, coach them through growing challenges and variety challenges, and having another view on the industry, for sure. So it's a job I do enjoy. Obviously it means that I have to rely on our crew very heavily for a lot of different things. Used to do a lot more in the evenings when the farm was much smaller, or on the weekend days. And we have some great crew that we've trained over the years that really self-led, and they come to me for troubleshooting and coaching and systems and stuff. But
once we had kids, all the evening, the late nights watching carrots in the pack shed till 11 p.m. kind of had to stop once kids entered the picture. So
for sure.
And do you source all your seeds then from there? I mean, what's your?
I would say the lion's share. But there's a lot of there are several things that we get from different seed companies. So our varieties, it's kind of funny because people say, "Oh, do you have all these special varieties?" And I'm like, I don't know. I grow mostly what's in the catalog because that's the best stuff. Like that's the adaptable stuff, So there's definitely things that we've learned about each little variety in our growing region and our climate and fertility needs or whatever, spacing and stuff. But what works here doesn't necessarily work other places. But what generally works everywhere. So,
do you have any interest in eventually producing seed yourself, or is that kind of an interest?
We are going to be growing a seed crop completely separate from my Gowan day job, but we're going to be growing this. I think it's a baby leaf chard. It's a commercially grown variety that currently has only conventional availability, and the seed producing company wants to make it available organic for organic growers. And so I think there's actually going to be a conventional field within a mile or two of our organic field, so that we don't have to worry about pollen cross-contamination because it's the same variety. Whereas if we were growing, so in our region, like I said, being a seed growing region, all the seed farmers have to work together to make sure that the isolations are maintained for quality and purity and true to type. And so the seed companies and the seed producers work together to maintain those isolations. So,
but yeah, so we're growing an acre or two.
Yeah, we're gonna start with 1 acre and see how it goes. So basically grow it much like you grow chard and then just try and make it bulk, basically. And then we did buy a combine 2 years ago. It was kind of like somebody called me and was like, "Hey Jacob, I heard you're looking for a combine." And I was like, "No, but what do you got?" And,
just to be clear, it was like a very old $1,500 combine. Like it was not some big fancy thing, but
it actually in many ways it's a perfect combine for small plots of seed crops. So it's very adjustable. It's manual, but it's very adjustable, and it's small, so it can get in and out of small fields. And the important thing is it came with a cutting head, which is like you normally use for grain, but also has a pickup head too. So for seed crops, you typically swath them first to let them dry down. And so it came with both of those heads, which is important. And it came from another seed farm down the road, and it was their like backup of a backup of a backup. So I think they had 5 different combines, and they're like, well, we don't have any more space for the new one, so this one's got to go. And so we just bought a farm and had a big barn, so we put it in there. So yeah. Anyway.
And then don't you also grow about 5 acres of is it rye that you're growing, a grain crop?
Yeah. So last year we grew and harvested 5 acres of rye, and now we've got 10,000 pounds of rye sitting in our barn.
So we got to figure out what to do with.
Okay.
We did grow.
So you grow first and then figure out where to sell.
Usually we do the opposite. We're selling rye berries like through our CFA and through our farm stand, and we're trying to figure out, there's some local mills. So we're seeing if we can get it, custom milled into bags of boldly grown farm rye flour, but we'll see.
It's pretty amazing. Again, speaking to the community and farming community, farming infrastructure in Skagit, we were like, oh, you combine your grain, it's organic, there's weed seed in it, there's some veg, but how do we get it cleaned? It's not clean enough to plant or to eat. And we're like, oh, there's a grain elevator right down the road. Oh, they're certified organic. Oh, they have cleaning equipment. Oh, it's $70 a ton to clean it. That's like nothing, basically. So we are extremely lucky. And it's like literally a mile down the road. It doesn't even make any sense that we're this lucky to be farming a community like this.
Magic Skagit.
The Magic Skagit.
I like that. So what would you say is the future? I mean, you've had a lot of changes here, but do you want to sort of land on a set number of acres? Kind of, where do you see the farm in 10 years?
I think coming out of this craziness, especially the crunch of the last couple of years, throw in the side of pandemic, it's been a little insane. So I feel like we're at the point where we need to and want to do some more visioning for, what does the next, this is our 9th season. So what does the next 10 years of boldly grown look like? I think in the short term, some stability would be nice. Our property has probably 35 acres of tillable ground. So we're fairly close to maxing it out. So I think really we need to think about, kind of take a step back, think about what are our goals, and go from there. And it'll depend again on where does the market go. Do we find a cap for demand or not? I don't think we have visions of being hundreds of acres. Jacob and I might differ on that, but
no, that doesn't sound nice.
But yeah,
I'd like to have. I mean, I think off the cuff, I'd like to have stability in like resilience in our farm system, and I think we've built resilience into our farm through diversity, both in crops and customers. And I'd like to work towards stability for all the other components, like land access, which obviously buying a farm helps, but I don't think either Amy or I really think that like 35 acres of vegetables on 35 tillable acres is like the right thing. We want grains to be a part of the farm as a way to rotate and take care of the soil. So that's kind of stability in that aspect. We really want stability for our workforce, for our employees, like as much as many people that want to have the year-round kind of career jobs on the farm that's like the goal for us. So like kind of crop, like finding the right crops that carry us through all the way through. I think the hoop houses are a great example of like, if that provides people work during our slow time, say like February through May, that's a really good way to grow that. And then stability for our customers. We want our customers to know what they're getting from us every single year and have that be stable and not, we'll try new things for sure, always to stay kind of interested. But it'd be nice if it wasn't like we were reinventing the production system every year. And I think less and yes, we are doing that. But those are the kind of things that I think about. It's less about like how many acres of vegetables are we going to grow. It's like, what do we want from the experience of this? Does that make sense?
We both definitely feel reinvigorated by having landed on this property. It wasn't like fun being all spread out at multiple plots and moving around. And I think we're feeling like we can finally farm in the way that got us excited about farming in the first place, in terms of relating back to our environmental values and land stewardship. We have some NRCS funding to put in hedgerows for pollinators. So I think just like really getting grounded on this property is super exciting to us now. And we need to do some more thinking about what the future holds. But I think for this year, we're going to just try to enjoy farming. So
it's interesting because I can reflect on, like, there's a perspective I can see a lot of other people having, where they say, oh, well, this is the farm that I have, and this is the mortgage payment that I have, and I want to maximize the return from this farm and like go to those highest value crops. And I don't think I like begrudge people for that. I think that's a good approach. But for me, it's much more about, I think this is like the systems approach that I think of. It's like, it's about the people and it's about the customers. And it's about like, if people want our winter squash and it's profitable, like, yeah, we should grow more acres of that, like as long as it fits in the rotation. And like, it might not be the most profitable, but it's a good thing in the rotation. It's a good crop. People eat it. It keeps people, our customers, from buying more Mexican winter squash in November, December, January, February, March. Like, I don't want to just limit ourselves to this property, but I also want to be in a place where if things don't make sense, we can shrink down and change.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a good plan. So I'll be curious to see where you are in 10 years too. So
we'll see.
Me too.
Well, I think we're ready for the lightning round. Are you ready for those questions?
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay. Number 1, favorite crop to grow, cook, or eat?
For me, it's carrots to grow, because growing good carrots makes me feel like a good farmer.
I feel like I'm always torn between radicchio and celeriac. I do love a beautiful radicchio field, and just seeing the plants get the big frame and get firm, and harvesting a nice big head of Treviso is probably like my favorite thing. But I also really have a soft spot for celeriac in my heart.
So why? Say more, because
I don't know. I love celeriac fries. I love celeriac fries. It's like, because it's the underdog as part of it.
Okay.
It's like the ugly vegetable that I want to tell people is really delicious. So
yes, it is. It is. I love mashing it with potatoes. So it's delicious that way. What about cook or eat? Do you have a favorite to cook and eat?
I do love radicchio. We eat a lot of radicchio.
We eat a lot.
Cliche because we're like known as a radicchio farm, but it is because we love to eat it. We salads.
I mean, it's whatever's good in the season that we're eating. Like, it's tomatoes in the summer and it's radicchio in the winter. I mean, that's, those kind of things. It's Rob in March. I don't eat that much kale during the year when we grow a lot of kale. But yeah, exactly. Whatever's best at the time of eating, for sure.
What gets you up in the morning?
I would say
our 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, our kids. Sadly, like the literal answer is our children, because I said we're not early risers. And so usually it's hearing our kids wake up. Yeah, I feel like the more philosophical answer would be because like we believe in what we're doing and we're excited. And so we embrace the day with vigor.
I don't know.
It's our kids.
Serving customers. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, we do believe in what we do.
We really think about our customers not as customers, but more as like partners, I think, and I think it's partly because that we're wholesalers. Like, we totally rely on our customers to communicate about our product and why we grow what we grow. It is totally a partnership, and we do have really strong relationships with those customers and want to make sure that we're always doing the best we can for them. And because, if we take care of them, they take care of us, and then we can take care of our employees and we can take care of our land. All that ties together.
What's the hardest part of farming?
I think just the diversity of things you need to be an expert in, or maybe not an expert, but well-versed in. We have a mentor who from the UBC farm who would say, farming's not rocket science, it's harder. And his point was just really the breadth of, it's much more of a generalist, like a breadth of skill set than a deep dive into any one thing. Like you have to market, you have to be financially adept, you have to understand biology and chemistry, communication, management, like just that diverse skill set, which I do feel like is like Jacob and I have very complementary skill sets, so it works well for us. But that I would say is just an ongoing thing that can be very tiring. So like having to be good at all those different things. Yeah,
I was gonna start by saying what Amy said, kind of like competing priorities, just like being pulled in so many different directions. I do think like market factors, market pressures are probably the thing that we spend the most time thinking about and stressing about.
Like things that are out of our control.
Yeah, things that are out of our control. And I think that's it's interesting. Amy and I stress about different things. She stresses out all the things that we can control and like making the right decision, which is good. And then I stress about the things that are like the weather or like, NAFTA and like, how Mexican produce comes in here at half the price of what we can sell it at.
And I'm like, why would you worry about that? You can't control it. So we're still in it. So it's kind of probably good that we stress out about different things. So we're often not both completely stressed out at the same time.
I think the thing that I just like continually reflect on is that there aren't very many farmers left, and the scale that commercial agriculture operates on is just so staggering and kind of beyond where we can comprehend and where we can kind of, I guess, like compete. And so I just wish it were easier for farmers like us. Like I wish there were more farmers like us and that it was easier for all of us. Because I don't know. Like it's hard. It's a challenge.
I feel like we're being very fast in your lightning round. So
yeah, fair enough.
If we need to speed it up.
That's okay. It varies. It's lightning fast, lightning slow. Okay, we've got a favorite tool.
Cold press finger weeder for sure. The Argus 3-point mounted.
Excel or QuickBooks. I don't know. we have very different skill sets and roles and
macro bins and forklifts.
Favorite music you listen to while farming?
I feel like this is going to age me, but I tend to like go back to a lot of my punk pop interests, like Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco. I don't know, stuff like that. Linkin Park, just blast it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just need whatever music kind of like suits the pace of things. Like you're sitting in the spader, you're going 1 mile an hour, probably not that. But if you're like,
if I'm working,
I was just saying, you're amping up the pack shed and you're matching the speed of the carrots coming out of the barrel washer or something like that. So yeah.
What do you love besides farming?
I would say outdoor pursuits. Again, something we hope to get back to more. We were just talking about maybe we can try to do a backpacking trip, the two of us this summer. And I do love baking.
I mean, yeah, kids, outdoors, food, like any combination of those things.
What would you be doing if you weren't farming?
I don't know.
Jacob would be screwed.
I don't know.
I don't know. I feel more, and Jacob knows this, I feel like I went through a long period where I was still like questioning, do I want to farm? Do I not want to farm? And I feel like Jacob is the sort of person where, he decided on this trip to Costa Rica in 8th grade that he wanted to farm. And that's like what he's been set on ever since. And I feel more for me, like farming is a way for me. It hits on all these values and priorities that I have of like working outside, being flexibility, growing things, or, being involved in kind of hands-on work, but it wouldn't have to be farming necessarily that does that for me. So, yeah, I feel very glad to be a farmer. And I also feel like if that weren't to happen, I could find something else that would meet those needs too. So I don't know what that would be. Maybe it'd be baking, running a bakery. I don't know. Oh, Noel's instructor is like probably the other thing that comes to mind. So
yeah, I like coaching people. I like logistics. I like technical systems, that kind of thing. I often think like, well, now that we have this farm, I'm like, well, what happens if we didn't grow vegetables? Like, could we make it work with Amy and I and, grains and beans and chickens or, something like that? Like if
again, check back in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see.
An inspiring farmer or land steward you'd want to have as a dinner guest, either living or deceased.
Well, I felt like we developed a really nice, warm friendship with Chris Blanchard for, I was like 4 or 5 years before we actually engaged Chris Blanchard when he was consulting at UBC Farm many years ago, and stayed in touch. And we were kind of in touch all the way through like our first 4 or 5 years. And then obviously he passed away, and I'd love to sit down and catch up with Chris.
He's a really special guy.
I remember he got to meet Leo, our son, when he was 1, probably. And he just loved Leo. And like they had a great time for an afternoon together. And yeah, I really miss Chris.
Yeah, no, we all do. How do you relate to that which is out of your control?
I think we covered that.
I think we covered that.
Oh, well, can't do anything about it. Let me think about what I can control. But then that's what I'll stress about, of like making the right decision.
There is a moment this summer in like late August where we were going through some, working through kind of staff, I don't know, feelings, kind of growth, diversity, a lot of, I wouldn't say like upheaval, but there is a moment where we needed to,
it gets stressful in August.
It gets stressful in August and coach people. And there were definitely 2 groups of employees. And one was kind of like, I feel a lot of stress around these things. And the other employee said, I wonder, and it was in a check-in, an employee review, the quarterly check-in that we do. And they said, I don't know if I'm a good farmer because I don't really feel stressed in the same way that other people do during the busy times. And I'm like, that's interesting. Like, you should kind of like reflect on that a little bit more, because I don't know if that makes you a bad farmer. So
maybe you're the
best farmer, like you can operate if you can keep your hat on when it's stressful, that's a really good thing. So.
Yeah. Well, the wisdom is always, don't ever quit farming in August.
Yeah, right.
If you're going to quit it, because that's like the tipping point right there. If you can get through August, things get easier. Where and how does wildness enter or influence your farming practice?
Yeah, I think we kind of touched, a bit on that here and there. I feel like again, back to my original interest in farming was I was going for more ecology. It was in a wildlife biology class that I read this book called The Farm as Natural Habitat. And I think it was a compilation of essays, but that's kind of what really like set off the connection between farming and environmental concern. In my mind, it was like farming is both one of the biggest factors as far as like habitat degradation and environmental degradation, but also has a potential to be a solution. And so, getting back to stewarding this property, having riparian buffer, putting in hedgerows, trying to figure out, I feel like it's a hard line to walk of how do you have this productive landscape that can pay our mortgage payments that we need to pay and foster diversity and wildlife. So, I think Wendell Berry informs a lot of that, of just this, philosophy on wild places and integration of like kindly use, I think is how he puts it. So, and we still like to get out to the wilderness and get away from it all. So that restorative time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, how will you grow old, or how are you growing old farming?
Definitely growing older with many more gray hairs, either from farming or kids or both. I don't know. I think we've been so caught up in the present. We're both very present moment thinkers, I would say. And so, yeah, I think, again, in the next maybe year or more, as we settle into this property, I think we'll have a better sense of that. But yeah, I think growing old on the farm sounds lovely. And I also think, given our experience of talking to many, many aging landowners who we spent, in some cases, years talking to about taking over their farm, and then to have them basically be like, actually, I'm going to die in place, which is like, great. Like, you can do that. Like, that is totally your prerogative. But we're also kind of like, let's not be those people. Like, let's see how can we facilitate the transition to the next generation, whatever that looks like at the time, whether it's our kids or not our kids. So I want to write that down somewhere and remind ourselves of that when we are old and enjoying aging out on the farm, of like, maybe that's when we want to go get an apartment back in Vancouver and enjoy city life for a while. Who knows?
I think my answer to that, I concur with what everything that Amy said. I also think about, like, in terms of where I'm at right now, being a little bit more settled on this farm as we were kind of getting our feet on the ground. We're kind of digging back into the horticulture side of things and kind of trying to become better growers. And it's interesting to think that when I was taking soil science at UBC was 15 years ago. And turns out soil science has developed a lot in the past 15 years. I remember being in class and we talked about soil texture, and we talked about soil chemistry, and then we talked about soil biology. And so they were like, well, we're just really starting to learn about this. And I've had time over this winter to dig into some of that soil science that's happened the last 15 years. And there's been a lot of new developments, a lot of new research. And it actually kind of answers that question you had before about where does wellness play into the and I'm like, there's so much diversity of knowledge that kind of it just continues to develop and evolve and become, known. And I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of that, like that exciting side of things. The like being engaged with where we are in new ways. I want to keep that.
Yeah, no, it's a never ending journey. That's for sure. Well, good. Well, thank you both so much for your time today and sharing your story and your farming practices and your wisdom. Really appreciate your time. So thank you so much.
Thanks for reaching out. It was fun.